Okay, good morning, everybody. Hope you're all doing well on this morning. We're going to get started in just a minute or two. We're going to take a minute or two longer, just give everyone a chance to log in and get settled, and then we'll begin the presentation. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay and see my screen. Again, I'm just going to wait for another minute or so just to allow people to log in and get settled, and then we'll get started. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started with today's presentation. Good morning again. I want to thank everybody for joining us, taking a little time out of their day today to be a part of this presentation. We know everyone's really busy, so we appreciate you taking time to spend a little time with us today. We're coming from the East Coast. It's a beautiful, hot summer day, so I hope you all are doing very well, and we think this is going to be a productive session for you, so we do appreciate you taking some time with us this morning. My name is John Lovell. I'm with Insight Mobile Data, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, which is all about fleet safety. And fleet safety is, to make a bit of a crude analogy, it's a bit like, personally, it's a bit like getting enough cardio exercise. Everybody knows that you need it. Everybody knows that it's something important to focus on. Everybody has a general understanding of what the benefits are. And everyone's generally aware that if you don't pay attention to it, you're exposing yourself to some, personal health risks. And safety and driving safety is a little bit like that from an organizational perspective, especially if you're involved in any way in managing a mobile workforce, which involves, multiple vehicles and mobile workers. So that's what today is all about. And just a little note about the term fleet. We realize that maybe not everybody who's with us today on this presentation may refer to their group of vehicles as a fleet. That's just kind of a general industry term that we use. It's really relevant to anybody any type of organization at all that needs to manage mobile vehicles, mobile workers. It just kind of covers all of that in one easy term. So we're just going to use that throughout the presentation. But we're aware that, not everybody refers to their group of vehicles as a fleet. So before we get started with the main presentation, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to have some time at the end of the presentation today for some Q&A. We're going to use the questions panel for that, which is embedded in the software. You should see it there. If you have a question you'd like to ask, please use the questions panel and type it to us, and we'll be recording it, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can at the end of the session. Another note about that is you don't need to wait until the end of the session to type your question. If there's something that comes up and it triggers a question, feel free to go ahead and enter that question, because that'll actually make it a little bit easier for us to kind of manage and line up the questions for the end of the session. If we don't get to your question, we'll do our best with the time allotted. If we don't get to it, though, there's also going to be some contact info on the screen for our presenter today. And obviously, you can feel free to reach out to him directly and ask him any question you might have on this important topic. All right, so that's the housekeeping end of things. And as I said before, if you're involved in an organization, or business in any way that is managing vehicles, driver safety, fleet safety is obviously a huge concern for you. And not just a concern, but in many cases, poor driving behaviors are an enormous cost that eats into your bottom line in numerous ways. This webinar today is intended to give you tips, strategies, and best practices to manage and prevent these behaviors that can be costly, both financially and also in terms of damage to your reputation. So with that in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Mr. Andrew DeLaChapelle. Andrew is the Director of Business Development for Insight Mobile Data. Andrew's experience in the telematics industry spans years and covers multiple roles across various industries. In 2011, Andrew's wife was involved in a near-fatal collision when her vehicle was struck by a distracted driver. And that really was the beginning for Andrew, both professionally and personally, of getting really involved in fleet safety and becoming a passionate advocate for it. Since then, he has devoted his time, effort, and resources to working with companies to reduce distracted driving and related vehicle crashes. He's a regular presenter and trainer on fleet safety, and he's also led workshops on preventing distracted driving for many large companies across the United States. Andrew is a certified defensive driving instructor through the National Safety Council, has completed his OSHA outreach training, and has authored a handbook called A Practical Guide to Fleet Safety. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter today, Andrew DeLaChapelle. Andrew, are you with us?
I am, John. Thank you for that great introduction. Appreciate everyone being with us this morning as well. So,
no problem. Let me just change you to the presenter here. And Andrew, you should have control of the screen.
Yep.
And I think you just need to expand your presentation to full screen.
Is that better?
There you go.
All right.
Looking good.
Fantastic. So, good morning, everyone, and I appreciate John's intro, and I appreciate everyone taking their time this morning to join us on this webinar, The Why in Fleet Safety. So, John mentioned I've been really since 2011, and since this my wife's near fatal collision, I've really dedicated my time and effort to helping companies really promote safe driving, reduce distracted driving, and related collisions. So this morning, as we get into this, kind of look at the following. So June is actually the National Safety Month, according to the National Safety Council. And if you look at National Safety Month, online or Google it, you'll see a lot of companies are actually gearing up or have geared up for June and put really a lot of effort towards safety in June. Today's agenda will include the following overview of statistics driving change for companies, driver behaviors affecting our roadways and a company's bottom line, controlling your losses, and then technology, friend or foe, which will be followed by, as John mentioned, a Q&A at the end that you can use to submit questions, and we'll do some answers. And then my personal contact information will be on the last page if you want to reach out to me directly as well. So with that said, put this next picture up, and that is the picture of my wife's vehicle. As John mentioned, she was struck from behind while standstill at a stoplight. The driver actually ran over her at 50 plus miles an hour. She in turn collided with 4 vehicles in front of her, totaling those 4 vehicles. So she is fine. There's some ongoing issues that will always be there, but for the most part, she's very lucky, and that was really the beginning of my dedication to working with corporations, associations, industries on reducing distracted driving within the telematics industry. So let's look at some statistics that's really driving change these days for companies, for insurance companies, private, public sector. So in 2017, motor vehicle crashes both on and off the job cost employers $5.6 billion. And I'll show a breakdown of that in a second of how that all kind of comes together. Motor vehicle crashes are the leading cause of work-related deaths in the United States. 2017, more people died in vehicle crashes than were killed by guns. So that's 37,000 vehicle fatalities versus 15,000 gun fatalities. Those statistics come from the Centers for Disease Control and the Gun Violence Archive as well. So in essence, motor vehicles are one of the deadliest weapons that literally are in our communities on a day-to-day basis. When you run a fleet, you actually drive more miles than typical drivers do, which increases the chances and odds of being involved in some type of collision or accident. If we look at the non-fatal side, which really affects companies as well, you can see the total recordable cases of 2.8 million cases involving sprains, strains and tears, injuries to the back, falls, well, I call them slips, trips, and falls, but you know, a lot of these are actually related to vehicle collisions, okay? They're work-related, they're mostly as a result of vehicle crashes and collisions. And how does this affect your bottom line? Well, cases involving days away from work, 882,000 cases, and the median days away from work, 8 days. So when we look at collisions and we look at crashes that are occurring within a company, it's just not the vehicle being involved in a collision, it's the workers as well, it's the number of days away from work, which leads us to going back to that $56.7 billion worth of cost to employers. Well, let's look a little bit further. So the direct costs to employers from motor vehicle crashes, I'm not going to read them all, but you can kind of peruse those and look at the healthcare costs, workers' comp, group health insurance coverage, property damage, municipal and utility fees for damage to roads and signs, etc. But if we really hone in on the top four, we're looking at workers' comp, which is the number one related cost, direct cost to vehicle crashes. The insurance side, liability claims and settlements, which we'll get into, property damage, and then motor vehicle repair and replacement. Those are the four top costs, direct costs to employers. If we look at the non or the indirect cost, which is it's a soft dollar cost. Again, I don't want to read all through them, but we can actually look at them and see, the supervisor's time, overtime to cover work of missing employees, employee replacement, training, interviewing, failure to meet customer requirements resulting from loss of business. But if we look at the four top indirect costs to employers, really it's the supervisor's time. It's rescheduling calls, making special arrangements, rescheduling deliveries. It's the time and resources to coordinate vehicle repair and replacement. It's the sheer fact that the vehicle may be off the road for a week or two or even a month. Failure to meet customer requirements, and also bad publicity and loss of business. It's funny that bad publicity and loss of business, everyone always asks, well, how does that really affect on the bottom line? And I'll tell you, if you look at one of the largest companies in the United States, and that being United Parcel Service or UPS, and I haven't had anybody, it's amazing to me when you look, you'll never see one of their cars being towed or hauled away. If anything, what they do when the truck breaks down, a UPS truck breaks down, they send a recovery vehicle out, they drape the vehicle so nobody knows that it's a UPS truck, and then they tow it away. They just don't want the bad publicity or loss of business. So why is this all important to you and your organization? Well, let's look at the behaviors affecting our roadways and exposing risk for your company. It's important because distracted driving and driver error related crashes harm a company's bottom line, its overall profitability, okay? So right now, again, June is National Safety Month. So, right now with the warm weather, it also, we have to understand that it increases vehicle crashes and collisions on our roadways. People say, well, why? All right, well, let's look at why. So in the summer months, we see a lot more construction going on during the summer months. So construction is typically done during the warmer months and can cause lane changes and speed changes and everything else. Results in more dangerous situations for both drivers and road crews, And it's so more important that the drivers be alert when driving through construction zones and pay particular attention to the speed limits that have been set for those construction zones. Summer months also bring increased glare from the sun. While the sun is always a welcome sight after a long and dreary winter, it can also impact our drivers at different points throughout the day. The two worst times for actually driving, this is one of the fatal fours in driving, are really sunset and sunrise. When you're driving into the sunrise, the glare really can wreak havoc on drivers and just traffic patterns and all that. And same with sunset. So the glare from the sun can actually decrease a person's ability to see both the road in front of them and lanes on either side. So we really want to have the drivers pay particular attention during the summer months with the increase in warm weather and sunny days. On top of that, in summer months, we tend to see a lot more people out in the road. They're riding their bicycles, they're taking more walks. They're actually, the roads are filled with more people. So high temperatures typically bring more people out into the streets to enjoy the day. So your drivers need to be really extra aware of their surroundings as more and more pedestrians and bicyclists crossing at different points and in different directions could result in a near fatal collision or a fatal collision for that matter. And last but not least, our new drivers. So, we see a lot more young drivers entering the roadways and starting to drive. So we want to pay particular attention to them because they're inexperienced drivers. They're still learning how, the hows, the wheres, the whys when driving. And just in 2017 alone, drivers between the ages of 16 and 24 were involved in over 130 vehicle accidents. So we really want our drivers to understand that, to pay particular attention to really all four of these hazards, if you will, throughout the summer months. National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration blames a lot of distracted driving due to texting, cell phones, which is a large source of the increase in fatalities that are plaguing our nation. So let's look a little bit further as of that into distracted driving, cell phone use, and things like that. So 80% of all crashes are the result of distracted driving. This is a statistic that continues to plague us. There's so many statistics out there showing that 80% of all crashes is related to distracted driving. But the flip side of it is everyone that really looks at this and looks at the statistics and looks at like the root cause of the collisions, 50% of those crashes are preventable. Okay, that's unbelievable. But we really want to keep the drivers less distracted. We want to train them on being less distracted behind the wheel. So how do we do that? So it's educating your drivers, and educating and training drivers is at the forefront. It should be at the forefront of every corporate safety initiative. So cell phone use. If we look at cell phone or crashes, 26% of all crashes involve cell phone use, and that includes hands-free. There is no difference between hands-free and handheld when it comes to the cognitive distraction caused by cell phones. And people say, well, where's that number come from? Where's that statistic come from? Well, that's actually people that actually, when there is a police report filed, those are the people that actually admit to using the cell phone when the collision occurred. So these are coming from police reports. Okay. Secondly, speeding. 32% of all motor vehicle fatalities include speeding. Okay. Again, this is actually through all the police reports filed when there's collisions and fatalities on our roadways. So we really want drivers to be less distracted and not using their cell phones and other things within the vehicle. And we also want to really monitor their speeding because there's no need to speed, and we'll get into that. So I do a lot of public speaking. I work with a lot of companies and through associations, through just larger corporations, etc. But one of the things I always do is I do a survey of the drivers that are in my courses, and I always ask, why do you speed? And these are really the top answers that I get every time: not to be late, It's safer to keep up with traffic. I always hear that. If I'm not going 80 miles an hour on 95, I'm going to be run over from behind. Well, that's never going to happen, but there's no one on the road. Time is money. Speed limits are guidelines. One of the biggest ones, I have a schedule I got to follow. I got to get to my appointments and take care of business. And then other people think it's just a speeding ticket. It's no big deal. Well, let's take a look at a little bit further. So if we look 10 miles an hour, or if you can travel 10 miles at 65 miles an hour, and that's uninterrupted 10 miles continuous at 65 miles an hour, it's going to take 9 minutes and 14 seconds from point A to point B. If we increase the speed to 75 miles an hour, we're going to actually cover that 10 miles in 8 minutes. Okay? Time saved, all of a minute and 14 seconds. If you look at a lot of the service industry and a lot of delivery companies, or just in general, the majority of fleets, if they're driving 100 miles a day, all they're saving is 12 minutes. That's it. But yet speeding represents the most collisions, and along with distracted driving. So we really want to train. It goes back to training and educating our drivers why speeding is not necessary, right? And there are no good reasons to speed. It's amazing how many times that you'll be at a stoplight, you'll take off, a guy speeds right by you, and a couple minutes later you come up to the next stoplight that's red, and who's next to you, or maybe one car in front of you, it's the guy that passed you at 800 miles an hour because he's in that big hurry, that aggressive behavior to get ahead and get to that next appointment or whatever. It doesn't pay. It does not pay to speed, and that's what you need to educate your drivers with. So on the National Safety Council, they actually, for distracted driving, they've come up with the following definition. Anything that takes the driver's attention away from the task of driving is considered a distraction. Again, anything that takes the driver's attention away from driving, the task of driving, is considered a distraction. They've broken it down to 3 types of distractions. There's the manual distraction, the visual distraction, and the cognitive distraction. Okay? The manual distractions, they cause drivers to take their hands off the wheel, such as talking on a cell phone, reaching for something within the vehicle, eating, changing radio stations, etc. Okay? The visual distraction is actually causing drivers to take their eyes off the road. They might be looking at their cell phone, they may be looking at something within their vehicle or outside their vehicle. Those are visual distractions. And cognitive distractions, they cause drivers to take their minds off the road and their minds off of driving, okay? Such as thinking about what happened at work, or what's going on the home front, or talking to others within the vehicle. Or in this picture, you can see the guy's got a cup of coffee, his eyes are off the road, and he's looking at a clipboard because he's trying to get to that next delivery or service stop. Those are cognitive distractions. Okay. Manual, visual, and cognitive distractions are all involved when a driver uses a cell phone while driving. Okay. So driving safely really requires a driver's full attention to the road and possible hazards like construction zones and pedestrians and other vehicles and teens and everything else that are on our roadways. Okay. And it's important to our safety and the safety of others on the roadways that we find ways to better manage distractions that occur while driving. And you'll see this guy's got a Bluetooth headset in for hands-free. Statistic after statistic after statistic, there is no difference between hands-free and handheld when talking on your cell phone. And that's something you need to educate drivers on. You need to really enforce no cell phone use policies, etc. So, I have companies that I go out and they go, "This is great, we love it. We just took all of our vehicles and we upgraded them. They all have Bluetooth hands-free technology." I don't know what they spent for that per vehicle, but I'm telling you, it's a waste of money because it still causes cognitive distractions when somebody's on their cell phone. Okay. Some of the other indicators of distracted drivers, they drive below the posted speed limit. They're talking on cell phones, so they're really not paying full attention to the roadway. So again, they may be driving a little bit slower, or they may be drifting within their lanes. Failure to stop at a stop sign because they're distracted, so they kind of roll through it, or they just don't even recognize it. They've gone 2 miles and they couldn't even recall the last 2 miles of driving. They're reaching around within the vehicle. They're reaching behind the seats. They're eating and drinking. They pull out in front of others. We've seen that 100 times. They're just not paying attention. And they're not signaling, things like that. So we really want to be aware of others on our roadways that are driving distracted. So, if I go back years ago, it was always about drivers being distracted. Well, these days, because of the number of collisions that are happening, I actually train drivers on what to look for on our roadways, and that's more others that may be distracted or fatigued and things like that. So it really goes back to educating and training drivers. So let's look at the recent survey. This is from Root Insurance, which is a startup, which is actually going gangbusters. But I really love this bottom stat. So 90% of drivers think they're better drivers than Uber or Lyft drivers, which in my opinion is probably true. But let's look at the first statistic though. 89% of drivers would give an Uber or Lyft driver a bad rating for texting while driving. However, what's alarming is that 39%, that middle statistic, admit to driving themselves or texting while driving themselves. So we really, as companies enforce policies and have no cell phone use policies and technologies to stop cell phone use, it's amazing to me how many people will shun somebody who texts and drive, but yet themselves continue to text and drive. So they're kind of like calling the kettle black in that instance. So I work with an insurance company and we work hand in hand. They actually target a specific vertical industry and they insure about 11,200 service type vehicles. So year after year, their statistics come out for their members and showing the largest incidents by cause, root cause of a collision. And this statistic, which is ironic, it just never changes. It can drop to maybe 38%. It may go up to 42%, but it always hovers around 40%. And that's basically rear-ending other vehicles. So it's driver fault. Rear-ending other vehicles accounts for nearly 40% of all collisions on our roadways, which is crazy. And if you look at all the other ones, like backed into other vehicle, backed into a stationary object, failure to yield right away, hit other vehicle on the side. If you add these up, the at-fault collisions, it's over 81%. Going back to that statistic, that 81% or 80% of all collisions are a cause of distracted driving. Well, this again further proves that statistic. This is 81% in this particular statistic from a major insurance company. All right. So we need to understand driver behaviors and why we are experiencing so many crashes within our company fleets. Okay. So one is stale green lights, and I always bring this up. Again, this goes back to educating and training drivers. So stale green lights, what is a stale green light? Well, a stale green light is a light that is green, okay? And how I educate drivers on this on a regular basis is if you did not see that light turn green, the probability of that light turning yellow and red by the time you get to that intersection, it's going to turn. I mean, the probability is extremely high. So let's rephrase it. If you did not see the light turn green, most likely probability is high that you will have to stop at that intersection when you get near it. So a lot of drivers try to beat those stale green lights. They know that. So what do? They speed up to avoid having to stop. And that's what leads to the following. So 2.3 million intersection-related collisions in 2017, 7,700 fatalities, and 733,000 injuries from those collisions, okay? And that's from trying to beat stale green lights and trying to, just crazy, all right? If we look, and this is according to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, over half the people killed in red light running collisions are the drivers and pedestrians hit by those that run the red lights. Over half the people killed in red light running collisions are the drivers and pedestrians hit by those who run red lights. Speeding and driving too fast often contribute to these violations. So again, going back to training and educating drivers, we have a thing in the National Safety Council And that's basically, we call it delayed acceleration. So how many times have you come up to an intersection and you see something like this, where two cars are competing? These are two hotheads, a little aggressive. I see it in commercial vehicles all the time, where the first guy off the light, they're trying to be that first guy off the light. You can see the light is red, the traffic is still flowing, but I always tell drivers, be the second off the line, not the first, for the mere fact of people that run red lights, okay? You do not want to be T-boned at an intersection. Basically, never enter an intersection first. Another thing that's plaguing our roadways and companies is fatigue driving. This really is a major push on the National Safety Council and other associations out there. It's become more and more apparent that fatigue driving is an epidemic on our roadways. So again, 100,000 police reported crashes each year. 60% of adult drivers have driven while drowsy, okay? Especially in the warmer months when it's the heat out there, you have dehydration. You really need to have the drivers hydrated throughout the day. You need to really watch how many hours that they're driving, because in many industries, more hours are spent driving in the summer months than in the winter months. So we really want to pay particular attention to fatigue driving. Okay, 30% of adult drivers have fallen asleep while driving. Okay, again, looking at statistics. All right, if we look between 6 and 9 a.m., 3,600 deaths, and between 3 and 6, we have close to over 10,000 deaths. But really, if you break these two times down, the most dangerous time to drive is between 2 and 4. All right. So nearly 40% of deaths occur between the 6 and 9 a.m., which is rush hour, and between 2 and 4 p.m., which again can be rush hour for many industries. So we really want to pay particular attention to our drivers. We really want to be, put forth policies and procedures that look and understand fatigue driving. Look at what time they're starting their day, what time they're heading back to the office or heading back to the warehouse. We really want to see and pay particular attention to when our drivers are on our roadways. Okay, this isn't just our drivers being fatigued; it's other drivers on the roadway that are being fatigued as well and falling asleep behind the wheel. I always recommend to fleet managers, take a look when you go outside and look around the vehicles. If you excuse me, went a little bit further. So look inside the vehicles. If you see a ton of coffee cups or Red Bull cans or Monster energy drinks, or if you're seeing a lot of over-the-counter prescription drug wrappers on the floors, that's time to take really precautions and be extra alert as to what's really going on with a driver or your drivers. Okay, when I see this, I'm concerned. It could be the guy has maybe a sleep apnea or sleep disorders. There may be something going on the home front, maybe something going on the work side as well. But I'm going to pay particular attention to my drivers. And I always tell fleet managers or supervisors to really go and just, when the drivers come in, without being too noticeable, but go and take a look inside the vehicles and see what you're seeing as far as energy drinks and coffee cups and Diet Cokes and things like that. It could be a probable sign that the guy is using these to stay alert throughout the day, which when the mind wants to shut down, it will. None of these drinks actually work. They'll give you a quick boost, but overall, they won't work. So again, being June, safety month, medications and driving. So, a lot of people talk about prescription drugs. We hear a lot about opioid addictions and overdoses. But a lot of people don't realize that over-the-counter drugs are equally as dangerous as prescription and illegal drugs. So especially during the summer months, we have a lot more allergies, medications being used. We have, for pollen, for mold spores and things like that. So, we really want to pay particular attention. When we look at the warnings on these prescription and over-the-counter drugs, we want to look and see if they cause any type of drowsiness, if they have any warning labels stating that they shouldn't operate vehicles or heavy machinery during use. And you as a business owner, manager, or a fleet manager or HR need to pay particular attention to over-the-counter and prescription drugs as well. So how do we control our losses? All right. As a company, we really need to start honing in and paying particular attention for a number of reasons, and that's what we're going to get into right now. So we've all seen these. We're driving down the road and we see, no win, no fee guarantee. I mean, it's just every roadway is plagued with billboards from these attorneys, injury attorneys as they're referred to. Down in Florida where I live, we have Morgan & Morgan, which is one of the largest in the industry, and they're bears. I mean, they are just awful to deal with. And I've had a lot of clients be subpoenaed by Morgan & Morgan over the years, and others as well. But these guys are real. And in the case of my wife's collision, we did use an attorney, and I'll tell you, I learned a lot. It was 6 years of litigation, and I do not wish this upon any company or any individual. Another reason why I spend time working with companies, working with drivers on this. The bottom line is, are you responsible? Employer negligence is real. So I'll use my wife's collision or that distracted driving and how we approached it. So we knew the guy was on his cell phone, and that's a distracted driving. But what we used was really the driver had a stroke 3 months prior to the collision. And that's really what we took and went to bat with. Basically, he did not have doctor's permission to continue or to drive a company vehicle, nor did the owner know that he had been or had that stroke 3 months prior. So basically, without doctor's permission, without the employer knowing, basically that driver was 100% negligent, as was the employer, because they gave him a vehicle to drive. It was a company-owned vehicle. So we went after the employer negligence side in the lawsuit. And it's real out there. It is very real out there. And that's what all these law firms, these injury attorneys will go for, is employer negligence. Not distracted driver negligence and all that. It's going to come back to the employer side, okay? So if we look what a crash could cost you, these are 2 live cases. This is actually shared from a friend of mine who's actually an attorney. So if we look at the resolution, $550,000. The medical bills were $284 covered by the insurance, and the attorney's fees were $82,000. Okay, and that was for a back, knee, and right shoulder injury. Right. If we look at this recent case, the resolution is basically $250,000. That was topped out from the insurance. The medical bills to date were $63,000, but the attorney's fees, and that's what kills a company, $55,000 for a total knee replacement. It's the attorney's fees that will bury a company. Okay. So is your company protected? These are things you really want to take a deep dive and dig further into. And I hear all the time, we're doing pretty good with our driver's policies, our fleet management, and overall safety initiatives. Are you? I mean, you really need to ask these hard questions, especially more so today than in previous years, all right? Are there improvements to be made, okay? Are all of the policies up to date? Some people, it's amazing how many times they go in, oh yeah, Johnny signed this vehicle use policy when we first hired him. Those policies should be updated, reviewed annually, at least annually, okay? And I find all the time, I see this constantly, where a company's, the president, the HR department, whoever, they write the policies, they make the employers or the employees sign those policies. But you know what? When it comes to the legal side, they don't hold up in court because they were never reviewed by a true attorney. The language may be too loose or too broad, or for whatever reason, it really falls back onto the employer. I always recommend 100% that any policies that you use within your company and throughout your company are reviewed by an outside lawyer or attorney to make sure that they are legal in your state. If you cross multiple states, that they're legal across multiple states as well. Okay. I also recommend reviewing your insurance coverage annually. Okay. Asking yourself, do you invest in and provide enough driver training? And honestly tell you that every company I go out and see, they don't invest enough money in driver training. They may touch on it once in a while, and usually what I see, it's after a near fatal or fatal collision. That's when the owner or the leadership team gets heavily involved in driver training, and it's, you know, a month of rah, rah, roar, roar, just to be subdued later on and less focused. You know, driver training should be part of all training, ongoing, if not monthly, weekly. I really think every week that those drivers are out driving company vehicles, some type of topic or presentation should be done on safe driving. Okay. And then lastly, are there additional resources to better our drivers? Whether it's videos, online videos, whether it's courses, whether it's instructor-led, National Safety Council certified instructors like myself. Can we bring in outside sources to really better our drivers? Okay. Those are all questions you want to ask yourself. So some best technologies with zero or little cost. Believe it or not, there are many of them out there, but these are some of the ones that I recommend on a daily basis. All right. First and foremost, you'll see that Chevron panels. This is kind of a newer, it's been around for a while, but you're seeing more and more of this placed on the rear and sides of vehicles. So Chevron markings now they're mandatory, and they have been for years by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration for all semi-truck trailers. So if you look down at this bottom left-hand picture, you'll see these Chevron markings on the back and on the side. And the reason they do that is because the 18-wheelers have very few lights, and at night they need to have more visibility. So when they're crossing intersections, our lights will reflect up and prove or show that there's actually a truck that may be crossing the intersection. Or if a car is approaching from behind, we can see the visibility markings on the back as well. These are reflective panels, okay? But the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, this has been mandatory for years on semi-trucks. Just recently have we seen more of on the back of ambulances and EMS and fire trucks. We're now seeing these. And I recently learned that all the manufacturers that provide these vehicles to our communities, private and public, this is actually now a requirement for all deliveries. So you're going to see these on every fire truck, ambulance going forward. If you don't see them on a current one, it's because that vehicle was placed into service before that mandate went into effect. So but you're seeing them on all EMS, emergency, public sector type of vehicles. Even the large companies like AT&T are now putting them on the back of their trucks. Xfinity is included as well. It's a very inexpensive technology that actually, it's not so much to help your drivers be less distracted. As you can see the statistic at the bottom, these markings can help reduce rear-end collisions by up to 41%. That's huge. So you're actually putting these or adhering these Chevron panels onto your trucks to prevent others from rear-ending your drivers. So again, providing safety initiatives for your drivers along the way. Right. Now I'll get into the cost on those. One of the other ways is driver selection. So, you know, MVR and background screening. MVR is motor vehicle records, which can be obtained through your local DMV or courthouses. But we want to do MVR checks. I mean, your insurance companies if you're a large enough corporation, many of your insurance carriers will provide you with your MVRs on an annual basis. But we want to do background screening as well. So we want to look at, you know, any type of endorsements on their driver's license, any restrictions, traffic citations, accidents, previous DUI convictions, and things like that. So how often? This is where I get into with a lot of companies, and I see that they do it once a year. I have a major corporation, 1,800 drivers that I work with on a day-to-day basis. They just upped their MVR reporting to twice a year. They were doing it every January, provided by their insurance company. And this past January, their 1,800 drivers, they found 80 plus drivers with poor MVRs. They had one driver in particular that had 2 DUI convictions in the previous 11 months, and he had been out driving a company vehicle for the last 11 months with those 2 DUIs. So basically, he was uninsurable. If that driver was involved in a collision, I tell you, those attorneys, those injury attorneys, would have been all over that. Could have been millions in lawsuits. So we really want to do MVR background screening at least twice a year. Okay. You know, a lot of people don't realize this, but 60% of adults have vision problems. Okay. So how does that affect a company? Well, if you have drivers, you really want to get a copy of their driver's license on an annual basis. Okay. I see companies that when they first hire an employee, they take a photocopy of the front of the driver's license, maybe front and back. They throw it in the employee file, never to be seen or looked at really deeply. So I recommend that every year, whether it's on the anniversary hire date or if it's just every January, whether a driver's been there for 1 month or 12 months, you get a copy of their driver's license. And what you're particularly looking for are any type of restrictions on their driver's license for, like, you know, for vision, contact lenses, corrective lenses, and things like that. I don't see that enough out there, so you really want to do that. The other thing are commentary drives. That's literally going out and driving with the drivers at least, some people do it once a year on the anniversary date of hire, which in essence, it's not enough. I really recommend at least quarterly. I know some of these companies have large, you know, like that 1,800 vehicle fleet. That's hard to do 1,800 commentary drives in, you know, every quarter with the managers and all that, but you really want to do it more than once a year. I have companies that actually have requirements or criteria that if they, you know, they have the 800 stickers on the back, how's my driving? If they get any type of customer complaint, that it automatically calls for a commentary drive and other consequences as well. But and that's when it's, you see in here, when an event occurs, and that could be that 800. It could be, you know, a number of things that you have built into your vehicle policies as far as a criteria, but at least quarterly for commentary drives. If anything, you know, it's a great chance to say good job to your drivers. So it's also can be a positive thing company-wide or corporate-wide as far as the safety culture. And it also protects your company and bottom line. Okay. Enforce safe driving behaviors. Again, if, you know, I talk about educating and training drivers on a consistent and regular basis. I mean, that's really what's going to save a company and its bottom line. But what's also vitally important is to adhere to and maintain a safer fleet is really having vehicle use policies that are updated, cell phone use policies, drug and substance abuse policies, vehicle inspection forms, pre and post trip reports, I mean, post incident reports. Are these all updated? Are they current? Do they reflect current state laws? You know, a lot of people, like, legalization of marijuana, it's going on, okay? Whether for recreational use or medical use, all companies need to know and understand their state laws and how these changes could affect the bottom line, okay? And how they could affect your policies, right? There's really no field sobriety test readily available. There's 2 companies that are at the forefront of it to test for marijuana use, but there's still, it's more of a done by trained law enforcement to understand through, you know, sobriety tests. So it's more of a, you know, it's not fact yet, or it's really more of a trained eye or trained law enforcement that can enforce DUI with marijuana use. But I'll tell you, those days are coming. And as a company, with the legalization of marijuana, I want to make sure that all my policies are up to date. Drug testing and things like that. I do not want drivers driving my trucks or vehicles at all, whether it's, you know, medical use or recreational use. I'm not saying that let go of drivers or being a proponent of letting go of drivers for the medical use or recreational use, but you can't afford to have a driver that's stoned when behind the wheel. So again, enforcing safe driving behaviors. Let's review all the policies. Let's look at our cell phone use policies, all these things. If you need examples or assistance on that, that's what I'm here for. I help a lot of companies. Post-incident reports, again, what happens if a driver is involved in a collision? Do you have it set up that within 2 hours he has to go have a urine or blood test? What are the incidents? What are the steps that you take that is company-wide for post-incidents or post-collisions, if you will? You know, these are all things you really want to look at and look at hard these days. So policy enforcement, again, you know, looking at cell phones, 26% of all collisions involve cell phone use, and that includes hands-free. You know, the best approach for keeping yourself and others and your drivers is don't use your cell phone. Well, number one way to stop employees from using cell phones when driving, that's educating them, okay? Educating them why using their cell phones is a poor decision, okay? No cell phone use policies, as great as they sound, it's hard to enforce, and it's also it's not realistic. Really educating and training the drivers not to use their cell phones is the best decision, the best approach to ensure that your drivers aren't using cell phones, okay? Telling drivers not to use their cell phones doesn't work, okay? There's technologies out there that will block the cell phone use. And as great as those are, they too do not stop a driver from going out to a 7-Eleven and buying a track phone for 12 bucks or 20 bucks and with a set number of minutes so they can keep in touch with their spouse, their significant other, whomever, their parents, their children, whatever. And they will do that. And as an employer, HR, leadership team, you know, everybody that's on this call today, a company is still 100% liable for the actions of their drivers when behind the wheel of a company vehicle. And whether it's a personal vehicle or a company vehicle, you are 100% liable for the actions of that driver. Okay. The other thing with policies, especially cell phone policies, is if all your drivers come into a general warehouse or office every morning and they see their manager, supervisor, the owner of the company, or anybody driving in with using their cell phone, that, you know, the first thing is resentment. They're like, well, why am I forced not to use my cell phone when, you know, the owner keeps on driving around with his cell phone? So it's really got to be a leadership, top-down approach to not using the cell phone. Again, it goes back to educating and training employees and everyone within the company, whether they're on company time or personal time, why it's so important not to use the cell phone. Technology, friend or foe. So, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. I've worked with hundreds of companies, thousands of companies, hundreds of organizations, presented. I've been, you know, featured in certain magazines or articles, industry trade publications on driver safety, technologies, and things like that. So, for crash avoidance technology, we're seeing more and more vehicles, and it's gaining in popularity. In the past, it was more of an option, an upgrade. Today, it's coming standard on many vehicles, but it's more and more manufacturers are only adding it to the vehicles, more passenger vehicles than they are in commercial vehicles. And you're not, you know, you're seeing it more across the board, but you're not seeing it so much in commercial vehicles and the larger class, called class 3 and up vehicles, you know, class 3 to 8. Technology is just not there, okay? Or it's cost prohibitive for the manufacturers to include, okay? Cell phone restrictions, as I mentioned, the company is still 100% liable for a company's actions when driving a company vehicle or driving a personal vehicle on company time. Enforcement and training, you know, enforcement of its no cell phone use policy, but more so training and educating. I would save the money, in essence. If we look at GPS and tracking and driver behavior, there are literally hundreds upon hundreds. The recent statistic was 600 GPS companies in North America alone, okay? You really want to hone in on GPS companies that actually understand and know what distracted driving is about, who have taken and advanced the technology that may include driver behavior, like alerting in cab. You know, they've taken really taken the standard GPS and advanced it similar to as we have at Inside Mobile Data. All of our units have the ability to buzz at drivers within the cab. So it's kind of like Pavlov's dogs where they're learning what they're doing wrong. Oh yeah, the buzzer went off 5 times, and at that time I had my head buried in my phone and I slammed on the brakes. Well, you know what? I know now going forward, not to have my head buried in the phone and not to slam on the brakes, because when I looked up, there was a car in front of me. So they start learning, and they actually start bettering themselves as their habits and changing their habits as drivers. So it really does help to have that in-cab alerting. We have an OBD device that also has a 200 milliamp backup battery. So if they try to unplug it and not being tracked, it actually will send a text or an email to the appropriate people saying that, hey, I've lost my main power and I'm going to my backup power, which is the battery, which is it's great technology. And it helps a lot of companies dive into having GPS tracking and driver behavior without having to install a 3-wire hardwired unit, which adds additional costs, things like that. But there are needs for the hardwired units, like PTO, power takeoff. So you want to know if a door is opened, or you want to lock or unlock the doors and things like that. So there's a lot of things behind GPS tracking that you want to understand. So when you're looking out there, if you're looking right now, or if you have it, you really want to evaluate how well it's working for the company. Okay. Yeah, reducing distracted driving. So as I mentioned, we utilize an in-cab audible alerting to modify and better employees' driving behavior. Trust me, I've seen a lot of companies out there, and if we look on here, if you look, this is actually somebody in the industry. So that they claim to be driver behavior focused, but they use a light sequence to notify drivers of poor driving behavior. So really, what is that doing? That's actually, the driver's going to be constantly looking down to see how he's doing while driving, especially coming to intersections, yielding and right-of-ways on highways and entering highways. They're constantly going to be looking at the light sequence to see how they're performing. That's a distraction. I was on another webinar a couple months ago for distracted driving with another company, and I kind of laughed because one of the questions that was posed to the board or to the presenters was, is it better to call a driver or text them during the day? Well, the answer is neither. That's, text them. So some companies have it that the driver behavior when he does a harsh braking will actually text the driver saying that you just basically had a like a harsh braking event. It's crazy. So what's the driver going to do? He's going to actually pick up his phone. He's going to look at it, which is increasing distracted driving of the drivers. So, a lot of technologies out there. Audible is always the best, but you really want to look and see how people are, what they're doing to minimize distracted driving. Okay. There's really a drive these days with video cameras, in-cab cameras that are actually growing in popularity. Mainly to one of the major reasons is to minimize insurance fraud out there. There's reports, started, well, I won't say where it started, but now people are going out, they're going to, a junkyard, finding a $500 or $1,000 vehicle, making it run, and then they basically intentionally cut off or veer in front of companies whose vehicles are logoed, and they'll slam on the brakes, hoping that they'll get hit. They don't care the consequences of these injuries that will be suffered. They just want to go and do a lawsuit. So cameras are really grown in popularity out there. But what you really want to look at, you can see this dash, it's, there's so many different cameras that are available out there. You really want to ensure that you're finding or utilizing a fully integrated camera solution, which provides the best in class for business owners. There's companies out there, I'm working with a number of them right now, that actually have 2 systems. They have GPS tracking, which is one solution, and they're using a camera provider for their second solution. Neither solution talks to one another. It doesn't communicate. It's not integrated. The reporting is separate. It's very hard to manage 2 separate systems. So the best approach, if you're looking at cameras or want to discover more about cameras, is finding a solution that actually is fully integrated, that gives you all the reporting, all the visuals, all the driver behavior, alerts, and activity that's happening between the 2 systems. That's vitally important, because you're never going to find the time to monitor 2 systems and then piecemeal together what's going on with certain drivers. It doesn't happen. There's not enough time in the day to monitor large fleets with that. Even small fleets of 5, 10, 20 vehicles, there's not enough time in the day to handle all that. So one of the caveat emptors, cameras don't fix drivers. When you utilize cameras, you really want a comprehensive fleet program that utilizes the video clips for training of drivers. You really want to be able to access those videos immediately. So you want alerts right then and there of when a severe braking or a harsh acceleration or a collision, a crash or a collision occurs. That way, you have immediate awareness to the situation. Some companies out there, all the videos go overseas. I know one company, 3 million videos a month that they have an overseas army of people that review each and every video that comes in, and then they rule out the false videos and then allow the customer access to the videos. But usually that's anywhere from 24 to 40 hours after the fact. Well, that's the point. It's after the fact. You need it right then and there. So you want a fully integrated system that literally gives you access to those videos right then and there, gives you access to those videos that you can actually download and create training presentations. If you have, let's say, 80 drivers and one driver's involved in a fatigue driving incident or a T-bone incident or whatever, you want to take that video and you literally want to create a presentation surrounding that. Let's use fatigue driving, for instance. You want to literally put a presentation together, driver training presentation on fatigue driving, and present that to your 79 other drivers, okay? So they understand the cause and effect of distracted driving. Training goes back to educating, training your drivers on a consistent and regular basis, okay? So really look, when you're looking at cameras, you really want to look and make sure it's a fully integrated system. Can you access the cameras real time as well? I mean, having the ability to literally hone in and look at a driver at any given time. Let's say you get a severe braking event. Having the ability to dive into that vehicle to see what's going on is crucial to any type of safety initiatives that a company is implementing, okay? How many cameras can you hook up? Is it just a single camera looking forward? That's not going to help you. You need forward-facing, in-cab facing, the ability to add multiple cameras. We have EMS customers where they have the forward and driver-facing, like you're seeing in this picture right here, forward-facing and in-cab. They also have side cameras looking backwards, so when the vehicle is backing up, they have actually evidence of that. And then on some of our EMS customers, they have a fifth camera that actually looks inside the ambulance in the back for monitoring patients that are being transported to hospitals or medical emergency centers. So, how many cameras can you hook up? So very, very important when you're looking at cameras out there. So the question is, does the solution provider allow for real-time access to monitor your drivers at any moment? Is it a desktop only, or can the video be accessed via mobile devices as well? So also you want to look at that, okay? So can you access it? Do you get alerts, immediate alerts for any type of video? And from those alerts, can you access those videos? You may be traveling, you may be out on the road, you may be meeting with clients, but you want to know what's going on with your drivers. And getting an alert that has a link to see what that video was, a severe braking, if you will, or hard cornering. What was Johnny, the driver, doing at that moment? Do I need to take more precautionary steps, proactive steps in training, in working with my drivers? Or is Johnny one of those drivers that I just need to literally have a long talk with because he's a high-risk driver that I can't afford to have on my team? So really, that's what you want to look at when you're looking at all these camera systems and GPS and vehicle tracking and driver behavior solutions, okay? Again, accessing those videos. Do I have the ability to access those videos or GPS data and use to my benefit as an employer or a fleet manager or HR department? Can I take those videos and those driver behavior actions and use it for training of my other drivers, okay? Or to correct and provide remedial training based off the behaviors we're seeing or the habits? Do I have the access to really provide that training or build some training around those behaviors, okay? I like this, and kind of add this last minute, but if you deal or no deal, Howie Mandel. Yeah, I love it. But you know what? There's got to be return on all this. And if you look up at the top of this picture, you'll see This is the CFO up at the top, and Howie's on the phone, and they're negotiating how much money the case on this counter is worth before she selects any more cases up on the stage. But right now, that case is worth $27,000. Well, it's a return on investment. This CFO, this banker, as they're called on Deal or No Deal, is really crucial in making sure that there's a return on the investment. I see companies invest in this money or in these technologies, all to let it just kind of float on the side with nobody monitoring, nobody using it on a day-to-day basis, usually taking that information and training drivers and bettering drivers, using it to really be proactive in the fleet safety approach, okay, and driver safety. So you really want to see a return on your investment. And this is actually one of my customers. They have about 47 vehicles. And you can see back originally this is a referral from their insurance company to us. We can see that they had 11 at-fault crashes in 7 months. Once we implemented our system, you can see it doesn't and it won't eliminate all collisions. Just not a fact. Sometimes it's not a driver fault. It could be a driver fault collision, but it's never going to eliminate all crashes that a company experiences. But if we can minimize the occurrence and we can minimize the severity of a collision, we're ahead of the game. You can see for the next 21 months, they only had 5 at-fault crashes. The key behind this number is the insurance payout or the auto loss run for this insurance company. So in the previous year, they paid out $272,000, whereas in the next 24 months or 21 months, they only paid out $6,100. That's a huge, huge savings to the insurance company, okay, for these at-fault collisions. So that led to basically a discount on their insurance going forward, okay? You'll hear a lot of guys out there, if you're looking into telematics or you have telematics, you'll hear a lot of guys that'll say, oh yeah, you put GPS in the vehicles, automatically you'll get a 5 to 15% discount on your insurance. I say bullshit. That'll never happen. What insurance companies want to see is they want to see a fully integrated, comprehensive fleet safety program that's going to minimize the company's risk and the insurance company's exposure or auto loss run, in other words. So that could take anywhere from 12 to 18 months, maybe 2 years. In this particular case, it took us 16 months to get a discount from the insurance company. But we proved to the insurance company, we showed them what we were doing, the steps we were taking, the policies that we were implementing, the repercussions for drivers, everything that we were doing, we shared with the insurance company up front. And then we proved to them of what we did actually benefited not just the company, but the insurance company's bottom line. Okay, so that's a return on investment. Okay, another commercial service company, 56 vehicles. You can see in 2016 they had 7 collisions. In 2017 they had 9. 2018 they had 1 after implementing our solution. And year to date they've had 0. Well, I take that back. They backed into a mailbox, which was minor. It was a couple $100 of damage. So that's what you want to see. You want to see that everything that you're doing, everything you're implementing is actually having a benefit to your bottom line. Why is that important? Well, if you look at it, the insurance companies look at what's called combined loss ratio. It's basically the auto loss runs, okay? On the insurance side, any company, this is the top 10 insurance companies in the United States, okay? If we look at their combined loss ratio, all right, 80% of these companies have a loss ratio above 100%. That means that they're losing money. Sure, they make it back through some of their other investments and other insurance like disability insurance, life insurance, whatever, flood insurance. They're making it back on that front. And they're okay with that. But when the insurance loss runs get higher and higher, they start taking a look. And what do? They start increasing the premiums to companies. Well, this is ongoing, and it's going to get worse because the occurrence and severity of collisions on our roadways is only getting worse. It's not getting better. So more companies are experiencing. Now, if you look back in 2015 of the increases, companies today are seeing anywhere from 10 to 30 or 40% increases in their auto premiums. There's companies out there paying $2,000 to $3,000 per vehicle annually to insure those vehicles, which is just absolutely crazy, okay? So we really want, they want to see a return on their investment, as you should see a return on your investment, okay? There's also other benefits. So it's just not reducing your collisions and crashes, the severity, your auto insurance payout, your deductibles and all that. I've had countless companies come back and say, you know what, man, not only did we lower our insurance, our number of claims, our crashes, made our drivers better, but we saw another return on the investment, and that was actually less maintenance spend on vehicles. So you can imagine if you can eliminate your severe and harsh braking, okay, that's going to minimize the hard braking events, which is going to lead to less brake wear and tear, okay, brake pad wear and tear on rotors. So we've had numerous customers report that they saw a 35% increase in brake pad life. So instead of replacing brake pads every, call it 10 to 12,000 miles, they're getting the recommended OEM replacement mileage of upwards of 18 to 25, 30,000 miles out of those same brake pads, just from reducing distracted driving, which is great. And that also, we talked about speeding originally. Speeding actually increases friction between the tire and the pavement, which actually increases wear and tear on the tires. So if we can reduce speeding and also coupled with the braking, the acceleration, and the cornering events, we're going to see an increase in tire tread life as well. So if we look at before and after in brake pads and tire tread, it's amazing how many miles companies were actually getting after minimizing those distractions and everything else, and the collisions and all that, and implementing these technologies in their fleets. So it gave them a boost to the return on that investment. Going back to that deal or no deal banker, she'd be ecstatic right now of seeing these increases in brake pad life, and tire tread life, and lower fuel costs and things like that. It all funnels down to the bottom line. Better bottom line, more profitability, the better the company is. So we talked about, distracted driving. We talked about, the statistics. We talked about some of the technologies out there. Let's look at some of the technology a little bit deeper. And this is kind of a non-salesy. It's just more of what we're seeing in the industry, general guidelines, not set in stone, but kind of what we're seeing because we're in this industry. So if we look at GPS technology, the upfront cost might be the hardware. Some charge for the hardware, some include it in the monthly cost. The hardware can cost anywhere from $50 to $399. Again, that's the upfront cost. Some people build it into a monthly lease, and we're seeing anywhere from $20 to $40 on those leases. Now, if they've gone to that extra level of reporting and alerting and things like that, does it measure and correct driver behavior? Well, it can. It absolutely can, okay? We can look at in-cab video and dash cams, okay? Hardware costs, you're seeing anywhere from $500 to $1,000. Some people bury it into the monthly lease, $50 to $80, okay? Does it measure and correct driver behavior? Well, cameras don't fix drivers, but if you use that technology to your benefit through training and educating your drivers, yes, it can correct and change the habits or modify the habits of your drivers, okay? But only through training and things like that. Cellular apps and technology that shut down the cell phone, there is a hardware component that plugs in the OBD. Some people charge the $75 to $100, and then your monthly cost is anywhere from $5 to $9, depending on number of drivers and other factors. Does that measure or correct driver behavior? Absolutely not. Does it change the habits of drivers? No, because I tell you, they're going to run down to the local 7-Eleven, they're going to pick up a track phone, and they're still going to be using their cell phone behind the wheel. So I would save my money. Chevron panels, great investment, huge investment. They're decals. You can actually label a truck from anywhere from $15 to $25. There's no monthly to it. Does it correct and measure any type of drivers? No, but it actually is a protective step towards protecting your driver. So it's a technology to protect your drivers from being rear-ended or hit from behind by other distracted drivers. It's a great investment, okay? And then forward crash avoidance, which we spoke about. It's available on many vehicles. Sometimes it's an option only. The cost can be anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000. There's no monthly on that unless you're building it into your monthly through a leasing company or whatever. Does it measure correct driver behaviors? No, it doesn't fix drivers, but it is a decent technology. It's a good technology. We're going to see it more and more on vehicles. It's going to be included as an option, or maybe standard on more and more vehicles as we go forward. So if it's available, by all means, grab it and utilize it, because it is great technology. Okay. So I bring this to your attention, all these prices and all that, because there's so much variance out there, and I want to be open and transparent with what's going on. A decent, any one of these companies, from GPS or in-cab videos, there's a lot of good companies out there, Insight being one of them, but you want to be, very cautious, because you want to find the right situation, the right solution. And I'll tell you, if nobody's willing to give you a pilot, someone wants to sign up all 50 of your vehicles, be very leery about that, because that's a sales rep looking for a commission versus a guy that says, hey, let's give it a shot. Let's equip 1 or 2 or 4 of your vehicles with this technology. Let us prove to you that we're the best out there at no cost, no obligation. If you have that approach, by all means, take them up on that. Okay. That's a company that actually cares about your bottom line versus the sales rep's pocket. Okay. So just some warnings and some guidance and insight from all my years in this industry. Main goal of all of this really is to return home safe every driver every day. If anything, if you guys take this one slide, make it a slide of your own, make a poster, and put that throughout your office, that's the main goal. And that's, whether your employees are office bound or you have guys out on the road or women drivers out on the road, this should be the company motto: return home safe every driver every day. So I really want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. I know I went over a lot of information. We kind of perused through some of it. I probably didn't slow down on certain slides and went too fast on others, but by all means, we're going to open this up for questions and answers. Anything I can answer, please, by all means, fire away at the questions. And I just want to appreciate it. I just want to thank and I appreciate everyone's time this morning for joining me on this webinar. Again, my contact information, if you want to contact me direct, my cell phone number is right there, and then my email is achappelle@insightmobiledata.com. So, John, all yours.
That's great, Andrew. You can hear me okay, right?
Yep.
Yeah, really good stuff. Thank you for taking so much time to share, your passion on this subject. We have gone a little bit over, but I think, like you were saying, I know Andrew could go on, for hours more on this stuff. As I said at the outset, he's very passionate about it. It comes from his own personal experience. And, it just kind of exudes from him when he's talking about it. So I really hope this has been beneficial to everybody. We were going to do a Q&A. I don't want to take up too much of people's time, but I do want to, there's one question that's come in various forms, Andrew, and I'll ask you to speak to this briefly. You mentioned this is a lot of information for people to take in. And I imagine, when people absorb all this, they say, to varying degrees, there's a desire to either create or revise their own safety policies, but they may not have the resources for that. They may not have the time for that. They may not even know how to start or have the expertise on staff. How would you recommend companies or organizations approach that? I mean, how would they, if they see something like this and they say, we really need to, take a good look at our policies, but we don't know where to start, or, how would you recommend they go about that? What are some resources that they can take advantage of?
That's a great question, John, and a great question from the attendees. So number one is, if you don't have the resources, time, effort, you're not sure where to start, reach out. Reach outside of your corporation. Look for third parties that might be able to assist. I mean, again, I'm not really. I did this webinar this morning being non-salesy. We do offer a comprehensive fleet safety program where we look at everything from the policies and procedures to driver training. We monitor. We do everything from monitoring the vehicles to updating everything to reviewing everything and consistently moving forward on the fleet safety side, whether that's instructor-led courses, training videos, things like that. But you really want to find a company that's passionate about fleet safety, that understands your industry and your makeup of vehicles and drivers. Someone that really understands what your headaches are, what your pain points are, and can assist on that front. I mean, there's a lot of companies out there wanting to sell you something, but with really no training, no education on driver safety, the laws and things like that. You really want to find a partner, because that's really what it is. It's someone to partner with that can assist with your efforts going forward. Whether that's us or somebody else that's really as passionate as we are, reach outside if you don't have those resources to handle it internally.
That sounds good, Andrew. Thanks for that. We just had a question come in late that I'll throw at you here, and then we probably just have time for this one additional question, just because I don't want to take up everybody's full day. But the question came in: does vehicle weight come into play when it comes to safety issues?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's various classes of vehicles. I mean, class 1, 6,000 pounds or less. I mean, you get up to class 6 and you're looking at 16,000 plus pounds or more. So weight absolutely does play into driver safety. Not only just weight, but some trucks have cargo on the back. So if it's a delivery company, saying delivering for a Lowe's or a Home Depot, will have washers and dryers and refrigerators on the back. It could be a sand and gravel company. It could be an ambulance company that has the weight of the back of that ambulance. So, weight does play a major role in it. And what's really, a lot of people in the industry talk about driver safety and driver behavior. Well, you look at their website or their application, if you will, and they say, well, here's our driver behavior, and they offer harsh braking. Well, what does harsh braking mean? Me as a fleet instructor or someone who's really, dove into this, I want to know what harsh braking is, what the severity level of that braking event was. And a lot of companies can't give you that. They'll say, well, it was he harshly jammed on the brakes. Well, I want to know the severity, because not only could it be locking up the brakes, but if he's locking up with the brakes and he's it's a 10-wheeler with a sandbox on the back, hauling sand or dirt or gravel, the weight and the distance to stop that vehicle is far further than, let's say, an F-150 pickup truck that weighs 5,500 pounds or 6,000 pounds. So if you got a guy that's driving around with 19,000 pounds versus a guy that's 6,000 pounds, major difference in the severity level of that braking. So you want to make sure that they understand that different trucks have different weights, and that you can tie driver behavior to the make, model, year, and weight of a specific vehicle, because it's vitally important that you know that certain trucks and vehicles take longer to stop than others. Certain vehicles, I had one recently where the driver was literally very aggressive and pulling out from side streets on the major roads, having to floor the engine. He's driving it literally like a 14,000 or 16,000 pound vehicle with a 500-gallon water tank on the back, sprayers and all that. Those trucks don't move fast. So he's actually putting himself and others in harm's way by trying to beat a car coming towards him. So all that, and that more is the aggressive on the acceleration side. So you need to know the weight of the vehicles and tied to the driver behavior, and that all goes to training and educating drivers as well. They're all interrelated when it comes to driver safety and driver behavior.
That's great, Andrew. Thanks for the thorough answer to that question. I think we're going to cut it off there. Just like I said before, we could go on and on for a while. It's an important issue for everybody attending. and managing these vehicles. But thanks again for your expertise, and thank you to everyone who stayed with us. We really appreciate your time and attendance today, and we hope this was productive for you. And just to reiterate one more time, we do have a recording of today's webinar, and we will be sending it to everybody who did attend. So once again, thank you for your time. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, John, and thanks everyone for attending today. And again, if you have any questions or you want to reach out to me directly, by all means, please do. Love to assist on your efforts on, any type of safety policies, procedures, driver training, and things like that. So thank you again, everybody.
Okay, take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.